In less than a month, Bitcoin has dropped from above $50,000 to below $40,000, even below $36,000 right now. What's going on here? Let's talk about that. And welcome to myfinancesteacher.org, where we discuss a range of assets, including cryptocurrencies, general stock markets, commodities, precious metals, relatively frequently with nearly daily updates. So for more details, you are more than welcome to join us. Today we'll have a look at a range of subtopics, but I want to start with cycle duration. Usually if you zoom out on Bitcoin, over the many years, Bitcoin has been following cycles that generally last for around a couple of months. Sometimes the cycles do stretch to a maximum around 3 months, but the usual duration is around a couple of months. And with the ongoing cycle being 49 days old so far, and with RSI relatively deep into oversold area, accompanied with a significant drop over the last couple of days, I think the ongoing Bitcoin cycle is getting close to its cycle low. In my previous video, I mentioned that I was expecting more of a sideways cycle on Bitcoin, perhaps giving us somewhat insignificantly lower low as opposed to early January lows. I mentioned we could have seen something like a cycle in summer last year, more of a sideways cycle. The reason for that is that usually after periods of significant volatility, we do see periods of reduced volatility. You can see it more clearly if you switch to a log chart. I have mentioned that in some of my really older videos. So to repeat, a general knowledge among traders is that periods of significant volatility are replaced by periods of less volatility and vice versa. Even just with a quick glance from mid-2019, we see a lot of volatility in the middle of the year, followed by a relatively sideways market. Again, a lot of volatility in the third quarter, followed by a sideways market into the end of that year. A lot of volatility into early 2020 with the pandemic drop as well, and a very quick recovery all within that same period, followed by again a period of relatively low volatility. So despite what I was expecting for the ongoing cycle, looks like we are still within the period of relatively strong volatility, but due to this volatility, I think the duration of the cycle is going to be perhaps a little bit shorter. We are already close to the average duration, so if the cycle continues for just another few days, perhaps we are going to see the cycle low sometime within a week, giving us a cycle lasting for nearly 50 days, close enough to an average duration of a couple of months. Our next subtopic is a quick look at RSI, which is now deeply oversold. In fact, the previous time we saw RSI levels at lower than where it is right now was all the way back where Bitcoin dropped down to around $4,000 at the pandemic low. So that also tells me that the cycle is probably really close to its cycle low. And once you do see some sort of a green candles, I guess you don't want to catch a falling knife while the red candles keep appearing on the chart. But once you do see a bit of green, that could be a good signal this far into the cycle and this deep into RSI. Any sort of a green candle could be a good signal for re-entry into the market. In my case though, to be honest, I do hold cryptocurrencies over the long term. I think in the long term there is still a really good potential for Bitcoin to give us significantly higher highs. So what I'm going to do once I see some sort of a green on the charts is I'm going to buy some more, but at the same time I do make sure I have a lot of cash all the time in my portfolios. So when the opportunities come, I do have a chance to buy at a deep discounts and gradually accumulating a larger position for that future positive outlook for cryptocurrencies. While in the shorter term Bitcoin is in a downtrend, I'm still very bullish in the longer term potential. I think Bitcoin is still likely to show us significantly higher highs, whether it's by the end of 2020 or by early 2023, we'll have to see. Again, as I mentioned, if you don't use leverage, if you use spot, if you actually holding your own cryptos, if you only invest the money that you know you will not need over the next few years, all of these are the factors that allow you to focus on that longer term potential without being liquidated in the shorter term. By the way, talking about liquidations, let's have a look at our next subtopic, which is volume. Let's have a look at volume over here. And we see that usually at cycle lows, we do see some sort of a spike in volume. Even if it's not really a cycle low, if we do see somewhat of a significant low, even if it's in the mid of the cycle, we still see some sort of an increase in volume. Same thing happening over here at the end of November last year. And looking at what's going on right now, we do see a bit of a spike in volume, although the spike is not significant. So perhaps over the next couple of days, if Bitcoin continues lower, liquidating more of those leveraged traders that generally take on too much risk, that can be our signal that the cycle low has actually taken place. Next, I want to have a look at the correlation between Bitcoin prices and the general stock market. Historically, many years ago, people have mentioned many times that Bitcoin was that holy grail of an uncorrelated asset. However, more recently, at least mostly during 2021, there is a positive correlation between Bitcoin prices and the general stock market. I'm looking at Bitcoin price versus S&P 500 over here at the bottom of the chart. We see that in, well, roughly speaking, 80% of the time, the correlation, which is the 10-day correlation in this case, is actually positive. And what do you know? Looking at the stock market, we see huge red candles on the S&P 500 as well. The ongoing short-term cycle is now 49 days old. Usually these also last for around 1.5 to 2 months. So I think we are close to a short-term cycle low. And in this case, given the drop, given the readings on the oversold levels, and given unusually long previous intermediate cycle low on the general stock market, I think now there is a pretty good chance that the stock market is approaching the intermediate cycle low as well, giving us an intermediate cycle that would probably last for something like 4 months rather than the usual 6 months, which combined with the unusually long previous intermediate cycle will actually bring us back closer to that average duration. By the way, we do discuss the general stock market, including the tech industries, Nasdaq, triple Qs, with the members at myfinancesteacher.org. So for more details on that, again, you are more than welcome to join us. Moving on, next let's have a look at some of the support levels. And here, to be honest, the picture is not very rosy. A relatively weak, insignificant support zone that Bitcoin has just actually broken today was this level around $36,000. That's from early July highs. But again, as I mentioned, that high was not really that significant. Hence the support level wasn't very significant either. There isn't much support zone below $36,000 all the way until that $30,000, which has been respected in January 2021 and again all through the middle of 2021. So as I said, the picture is not extremely rosy. Unfortunately, the next support zone on Bitcoin is all the way down around $30,000. And of course, whether Bitcoin drops there or not, that remains to be seen. In either case, I do think the cycle low is approaching over the next several days. Perhaps if there is some sort of a liquidation event, as we saw at the previous Bitcoin cycle low in early December, we might see some sort of a candle wick all the way down to $30,000, perhaps poking just below that to trigger even more of the stops, to psychologically trigger even more of the traders before the new cycle in Bitcoin takes place. By the way, talking about the market psychology, let's have a look at the crypto fear and greed index, which is right now at the level of 13. So again, generally over longer term, if you are not using too much leverage, it is a good idea to buy into any sort of assets whenever this proverbial blood is on the streets. So buying when we see extreme fear is generally not a bad strategy. Again, as I mentioned, perhaps you don't want to catch a falling knife, so what I'm going to do with the members at myfinancesteacher.org is I'm going to use some of that cash on the sidelines, which I always have in the model portfolio, to add to some of the existing crypto allocations once I see some sort of a green on the chart. And lastly, let's have a look at another sentiment reading on the market, which is the Optimism index on Bitcoin. We see that the Optimism index is really low right now, nearly as low as it was when Bitcoin dropped all the way down to $30,000 in the middle of last year. The Optimism index is just about 5. That's as of yesterday. Today, Bitcoin is showing red candles again, so you might assume that this Optimism index has reached at least down to that level of 5. And as I mentioned, we still might see relatively low Bitcoin prices over the next few days as we approach that cycle low, and that might allow this 10-day moving average of this Optimism index to come closer to under 30 again. Usually this level of under 30 on the 10-day moving average has been a really good buying opportunity. And lastly, in the middle of next week, we might have a relatively important event coming up which might turn around the Bitcoin markets and a lot of other markets back to the upside. For more on that, join us at myfinancesteacher.org. For now though, I wish you a wonderful weekend. Bye bye.